Reinier de Ritter, and I mean this lovingly since I know there's a chance he might see this, is one of the least heroic looking fighters in recent memory. At 6'4" and easily making 185, he's a lanky freak. But oddly enough, for a tall Dutchman, he's a BJJ specialist, and a really fun one at that. People are now really starting to discuss him as a fighter because of his fraud checking of Dana White's second most favored boy toy in Bo Nickel, but he's had a really interesting career to date. As a double champ in 1FC, which admittedly, like everybody in one worth a damn has also done. His game is really interesting to me, because unlike a lot of BJJ specialists, he's mostly a top player.
I'd be a top, that's for sure.
Which in MMA sets you up for a more advantageous transition to the sport, as if you're on bottom in MMA, you're losing, no matter how pretty your guard work is. Unfortunately, unless you're sweeping or going for a back take like Charles Oliveira or Alexandre Pantoja, you're just kinda wasting your time. This is why guys like Renato Moicano, BJ Penn, Gilbert Burns, or Glover Teixeira succeed. They focus on guard passing and smothering their opponents. De Ritter has a high ceiling in the UFC in my opinion due to his grappling in a grappling weak division, and if he improves his entries he can minimize the risk of getting bonked, as his ridiculous striking leaves him open when entering the pocket. His clinch striking isn't bad at all, with his stature allowing him to get knees up very high, which of course is how he finished Bo Nickel. That being said, if he gets slapped while closing the distance, this isn't going to do him much good. Of course, to truly gauge his potential, one must view his grappling, and so in order to do so, we're going to look at every fight he had in 1FC, excluding his grappling exhibitions against Andre Galvao and Tai Rotolo, mostly because I'm focused on his MMA career, and partially because World Championship grapplers are a bit out of my depth. If by some reason there's popular demand, I might go back and do those too. His UFC fights will also not be included due to copyright restrictions. They tend to be very aggressive on recent fights, with all of RDR's fights and the promotion being within 7 months of the time of writing this, and I'm not taking any risks on copyright strikes given how many this channel has taken on the chin. I'll do my best to provide some key takeaways into why his grappling works, as in no way am I claiming to be a better grappler. I won't really be noting striking exchanges in space, because I'm even less of an expert, but I'll note some clinch work. Good? Let's go. Versus Fan Rong. We enter our journey against Fan Rong, which is also a term you could use to describe people who think that Johnny Hendricks beat George St. Pierre. Rong has the delightful nickname of King Kong Warrior, and in classic Chinese fighter fashion, had a possibly sketchy record of basically all round one finishes prior to entering one. De Ritter is making his debut, as is Rong, on a card aptly titled Hero's Ascent. To figure out who's Romulus and who's the guy getting his head caved in, let's watch the fight. De Ritter gets tagged with the leg kick, and not liking it, Volkan blitzes his way into range before grabbing a snatch single. His inflatable car dealership arms allow him to reach for legs at distances that others can't, and really present a problem for opponents with slow reactions. Despite leaving his head open for a knee, De Ritter swings Rong to the mat, landing in a pinned half guard. Rong clearly has no idea what the fuck he's doing and grabs a guillotine grip, and as De Ritter uses his length to pass the side control, Fan basically places a sign over his head reading "Please Von Flu choke me, Daddy." He is, however, smart enough to let go and tries to get his near side leg back between Reiner's to regain half, but De Ritter switches from the far side to near leg just in the nick of time, almost trying to fold Rong's legs together like he was going to set up a figure 4 leg lock or a sharpshooter. De Ritter begins to create great pressure with an incredibly tight crossface as he turns his shoulder counterclockwise to try to move to a head and arm choke position. I love this from De Ritter, since a sense of pressure isn't always something you see from pure BJJ guys. It's mean, which is to say, Dutch. He uses this pressure to fully pin Rong, who's flat and no longer in position to work his knee inside. It's a seemingly insignificant exchange to most, but preventing your opponent from re-guarding is incredibly fucking important in high-level grappling. Passing and stopping your opponent from regaining their guard is what separates good pressure grapplers from submission artists. De Ritter twists the near side leg once again and turns the opposite direction he did before, almost looking like he was top north-south. From here, he slips his left arm out of the crossface and goes for a Kimura, a play Sean Brady does often, and one that De Ridder often uses to eventually work a back take. He's cranking the arm almost like a wrist lock, but doesn't seem to intend to get his left leg over for a proper finish, before we see the method to his madness. As Rong explodes upwards, thinking he's exploited a mistake by De Ridder, and instead finds himself straight into a fucking Darce choke. De Ridder rolls for style points, and just like that, he's finished the fight. This is a lot of writing about a very short fight, but it's important to introduce the tendencies of De Ridder. The Darce or screw choke is a good submission in general, and often easier for those with long arms, such as De Ridder, to snatch. De Ridder is already exploiting that, but combined with his bad faith Kimura attempt, he basically sprung a mousetrap on an admittedly dogshit opponent. He does have bad instincts, however, with his bum rush into a single leg, begging someone to hit a Masvidal versus Ben Askren style knee on him. To see whether he can improve this, let's advance to his next fight, versus Gilbert Galvao. We enter our second fight against a man who makes Uberine blush, the man so juicy his DNA's 85% Capri Sun, one Gilbert Galvao. This fight shows an important improvement for the Dutchman immediately, as instead of blitzing in for the snatch single, Reinier actually beautifully times the shot, with the Brazilian having a cartoonish wind-up on a hook that allows him to duck under it. Galvao is able to put in a whizzer, but he has been turned against the ropes, showing that De Ridder has some sneakily smart ringcraft. Galvao is getting absolutely bullied in this clinch, and obviously wants to reach for De Ridder's legs, when another part of the RDR method comes into play. Normally when someone sprawls, their legs are so far back that it's hard to land a good knee before moving closer again, which then once again defeats the purpose and makes it easier for you to get taken down. De Ridder is so long that he doesn't actually have to fully sprawl, and thus can basically do a half-ass sprawl and land knees, holding his weird lazy-looking but effective over-under clinch he loves as he rains punishment. He just walks Gilbert around the ring until finally they break, but he chains a body kick into another clean entry, attempting to shelve the leg before saying fuck it and just using a body lock to swing him to the ground. I'm pretty sure he lands in a half guard, but it might be side control. Regardless, he passes to the side immediately. Galvao surrenders his back in an attempt to get up, and De Ridder responds in slick fashion, trying to do a back take into a head and arm choke, but the Brazilian twists back to flat. Galvao regains half guard in the flurry and immediately tries to get up, but De Ridder grinds his elbow into his neck and sends a few against his head for good measure. To stand up from a half guard position like that, the motto I've been told is high head and high hips, and by both grinding the elbow against Galvao and also fucking hitting him, he has prevented an advance in posture. Galvao instead surrenders and shrimps away from that punishment. From here, De Ridder sort of lets him up, as Galvao is able to build a base, but pays for it with some strikes eaten on the way up. Galvao stays up for almost the entire rest of the round, but RDR hits a great outside trip with 20 seconds to go. He doesn't really have time to score a submission, and thus rains knees on him. As a note, pride rules are under effect here, so De Ridder can hold his opponents to the Darce position to rain knees, a special tool that will help us later. The round ends, but Galvao is almost broken, as if De Ridder had 30 more seconds, he would have gotten him out of there. Galvao tries to make some sort of statement as the action resumes, but his wild and sloppy blitzes are less evident of a rabid animal, and more so of a wounded one going for broke. He is hurt, and he is tired. Whether consciously or not, he probably wants a way out, and De Ridder is going to give it to him. De Ridder pounces on him for a takedown so fast and mangled I can't really tell you what happened. I'm not sure if a foot sweep or a trip happened. Galvao might have even just fallen over. Rest assured, he's done. Gilbert turtles, RDR cinches up a Darce position, and knees him in the head until Galvao flattens out and the fight is called. It's ruled as a knockout, but given how light the knee looks, I'm doubtful he was flatlined. I think he was somewhere between that and a submission due to strikes. This isn't meant to slander Mr. Galvao, I'm sure he could beat my ass. I'm just looking at this critically. While the level of competition is still highly questionable, as unfortunately it is even in the highest level 1 fights, the entries in this fight immediately look a lot cleaner. He also fully integrates strikes in his grappling, with the Darce to pride knees looking deadly. Before he goes for any titles, however, he's going to have to bump up competition, which leads up to the first decision in this study. His next opponent is none other than Ataides. Leandro Ataides. This is one of those fights I talked about in my Yuri video that are interesting as a failure. Despite the judge's possibly crooked decision, our beloved Dutchman did not win this fight. He did not pass go, he should not collect $20. He spends the first round failing takedowns as his TD game becomes less and less effective if his opponent is as tall as he is. Ataides chins him multiple times and responds to each throw perfectly, beating them by either going to the dogfight or ankle bite position depending on how you call it, and standing back up, as well as disregarding RDR's lazy imitation of the Sakuraba-style Kimura. Leandro wins the first round 10-9. Ataides rocks him more in the first minute of the second round before a very mysterious timeout. One of the commentators explains it in one sentence, but the audio is so poorly mixed on the YouTube upload that I can't tell what the hell he's saying. If you know, please comment, because there's no obvious foul or anything. When action resumes, RDR continues getting the shit beat out of him until Leandro gets greedy while hunting a highlight finish, going for a flying knee that gets him taken down. This lasts for approximately 0 seconds as Leandro then turtles and takes RDR's back in turn, standing back up. RDR continues to get beat up and is cut open, clearly losing the round 10-9. One takedown has been landed for RDR and basically no control time. In round 3, the Brazilian continues to play his blockhead like a pinball until his Dutch instincts kick in and he groin shots Leandro. The striking is a little more even, but he still loses the round in my opinion, with Leandro winning all 3. He just could not get his grappling going as the takedowns were not there. No matter how good he is on the ground, he needs to get there, and quite simply could not exploit the same flaws he did against prior 2 opponents. His snatch singles weren't working because they weren't set up with enough guile to catch someone as tall as him, and the judo throws were even more easily blocked, once again because of an opponent with a more similar frame. We will see RDR learn from this, so this fight is actually very important for his learning curve. Somehow, De Ridder is given the decision. This fight happened in Jakarta, and one itself is in Thailand, and so I'm not saying that a decision was rigged, but oh no, I am. This is pretty rough. Oftentimes in 1FC, to beat one of the promotion's favorites, you basically have to kill them. To be clear, I love this goof from the Netherlands, so it's both rough to watch him get his ass beat, and rough to see him get something he didn't earn. Regardless, he's been dragged against his will to a title shot, and that's what he's gonna get, goddammit, because Chatri said so. Versus Aung La Nsang. Sorry for my pronunciation, Myanmar. We now enter the cage against the Burmese Python, one of the aforementioned many double champs of 1FC. After all, what screams would be solved weight cutting, like guys fighting up and down willy-nilly. Gripes aside, this is a guy who's held on to 2 belts for a few years each, which is somewhat impressive regardless of the level of competition, going back up and down in each weight class to defend one each once a year. After eating a few leg kicks, which he absolutely does not like, De Ridder shoots for the single and doesn't get it, but chains it into a trip which earns him the back immediately, locking up a body triangle. Aung La initially does a decent job defending the back, staying composed and trying to simultaneously fight the hands and the feet of De Ridder. He then does something really good by grabbing a 2-on-1 on the choking arm and pulling it to the opposite side of his head, seeking to turn into the Dutchman and change to top of full guard, but the body triangle proves too hard to break and he's forced to sit back down. What's really funny is that at times, the body triangle of De Ridder slips inside of Aung La's legs, and could have potentially made him vulnerable for that silly footlock one can get if the opponent crosses their feet from behind, but his legs are just so goddamn long that most would have trouble reaching his feet to grab it. We spend some more time here before the finish comes via another great trap set by De Ridder. He releases his body triangle momentarily whilst keeping one hook still in, and as Aung La suddenly explodes to stand up, De Ridder uses his height to jump back onto the back and get a better bite on the neck of his opponent. It's not really on the artery, but one hell of a chin crank, and just as it's starting to slide down the chin and get into a proper choke, the Python has had enough and understandably taps. This fight really does show that DeRitter is ahead of a lot of people who claim to be black belts in MMA, as his retention of back control was really excellent. Normally it's only a matter of grabbing a 2-on-1 and exploding to escape the back unless you're against someone truly proficient, and the retention combined with setting traps shows that DeRitter is constantly thinking in these positions instead of just stalling. Because of how one works, he's going to get an immediate rematch, but for the other belt, the Python holds one weight class up, so let's see how that goes. Versus Aung La Nsang, second fight. DeRitter opens almost immediately with a great double leg, putting his opponent on his ass just as he tries to land a combo on the night. He keeps trying to suck his opponent's hips away from the cage and successfully does so, feigning a back take by rolling and landing in the same position as before, except this time they're out in open waters with no cage to help the man on the bottom stand up. He rolls again, and Aung La is almost able to get up, but instead of refusing to let go of his back control, DeRitter uses the momentum to swing himself over to half guard, using the one hook he still had in. DeRitter goes to that mounted ghillie from half guard to try and pass, which works, and he then once again has the back as his opponent turtles. Aung La stays incredibly disciplined even in the face of punches from the rear, and so DeRitter bails and goes to the head and arm, which looks incredibly tight, until Aung La explodes to his feet. Evidently there was more space in the choke than it looked. Speaking anecdotally, sometimes you think you have the head and arm incredibly tight, but there's some slack in the arm to artery connection you can't see, which can be easily remedied by pulling the head up and tightening the grip. Perhaps unwisely, the Python jumps into the guard of DeRitter, who almost immediately goes from half guard to regaining full guard. The round ends with Aung La wisely standing out of the guard and kicking. Almost immediately, once again in the second, we see the Dutchman go for the takedown, ducking the hook and try and get the body lock, releasing and then immediately shooting a double, and then single, and then double, and then single once again before his opponent has time to breathe. He goes back to the single and finishes it, showing that he's no longer a one-note takedown guy. Unlike other BJJ specialists, he can chain one takedown into another, if not fluently, then adeptly enough to give problems for non-grapplers. Nsang turtles and keeps a strong base, even stuffing the head on DeRitter's attempts, and then gets back up, which gets a lot of respect from me. Unfortunately for him, RDR is not in the business of letting him breathe, and reshoots. Even though Aung La stands back up, it feels like he's getting smothered. And as he gets up, it feels like he's burning more energy defending than RDR is shooting. DeRitter then does take him down, but Aung La keeps in butterfly hooks until they sort of slip, passing to half and then finally mount. The next few sequences are honestly more of the same, and DeRitter ends the round throwing elbows from the knee on belly. The first couple minutes of the third are spent once again with DeRitter chaining takedowns into back takes before his opponent turtles, and the first really interesting tactic is bailing on a mounted triangle to the darce, which is used much like it was against Gilbert Galvao, which the commentators point out, good job guys, you did your homework. The longer the fight goes, the less I really have to say, as with each second, a DeRitter victory is more and more assured, and Aung La survives almost on heart alone. He has no answer for the Dutchman's grappling, and while he's disciplined enough to not be finished, he isn't really able to get out of the flow. He finally explodes and gets top position in the waning moments of the fight, but is too threatened by triangle attempts and shoulder crunches to effect any sort of ground and pound despite the urgency, and DeRitter coasts to a decision. While not as exciting as previous bouts, this was a clinic in control by the Dutchman, and not just lay-and-pray control, but constant submission threats and readjustments, showing a willingness to give up a bad position and reset quicker than the opponent can react. It's a portrait of a well-rounded grappler, and one I deeply admire. Versus Kiamrian Abbasov. Once again, apologies to the nation of Kyrgyzstan for my pronunciation. His first defense of the middleweight title comes against Kimrian Abbasov, who, wait for it, is the welterweight champ challenging up for double champ status. Shocker right now. Mr. Abbasov is truly one of the fighters that have ever existed. RDR gets the takedown right off the bat as he wants to, using the body lock to inside trip combo he absolutely loves. He lands in side control and starts walking up into a scarf hold, spending a solid 2 minutes in the position. Quite frankly, it's one of the more stalling type scenarios I've seen him in, but he does something interesting as he tries to step over for an armbar before cradling his way back to side control. He tries to take mount to kill the stalemate, but Abbasov traps one leg in to regain half guard. DeRitter employs the classic BJJ technique of punching to pass, and Abbasov urgently scrambles back up. He grabs his favored Darce position in order to throw knees. Abbasov actually counters really well, dropping to his knees to get a very strong base whilst loosening the grip and staying on his feet for the rest of the round. Round 2 begins with more of the same as RDR captures the leg while standing without having to use his arms and just swings down his opponent in one of the lowest effort successful takedowns I've seen recently, up there with Peter Yan's sneakiest Sotogaris. DeRitter keeps alternating between full mount and S-mount as he just batters Abbasov. It's a rare, really great ground and pound performance for mount by DeRitter, as he just does not let up at any point. He stays glued to him for the rest of the round, momentarily trying back takes, mounted triangles, etc., but almost finishes with a head and arm choke before Abbasov is saved by the bell. Apparently, he takes this personally, as very quickly he secures a single leg and cinches up the head and arm for the win. In my opinion, Abbasov wanted out of there, and he was hurt really badly by the ground and pound, but that doesn't diminish RDR as he's the one who made him quit. I really want to see more performances like this from him, because aside from the Darce position where he throws knees, he doesn't do a lot of ground and pound. I understand that he wants the submission, but people are a lot easier to submit once they're concussed, and this win is a proof of concept for that approach. Versus Vitaly Bigdash. This one is pretty much everything in DeRitter's game plan going perfectly, as he lands a similar knee to the one that ended Bo Nickel right off the bat. Bigdash fucks himself by pulling Gilly instead of just using the grip to stop the takedown and get off the cage. Dude's jacked, so I think the squeezing made it look worse than it actually was, and holding on for so long definitely blew up his arms. Bigdash attempts to just hold on to close guard, so DeRitter obliges him by just stacking his guard and throwing punches until he opens, allowing RDR to get his favored top half guard. From here, he employs his bad faith Kimura, which he tries to chain into a back take. It doesn't work fully this time, but he does retain full guard. Almost immediately, Vitaly leaves his arms too far apart, and just like that, an inverted triangle choke is obtained. RDR walked through him like it was nothing, and it's a very pretty submission to add to his resume. While he's easily triumphed in 4 consecutive title fights, DeRitter will next have to fight another S-tier juice box in Anatoly Malikin, and it went just about like this.
RDR couldn't take a punch. They are sorely mistaken.
Yeah, if you've ever shaken hands with Anatoly Malikin, he's got 2 hands that are like anvils, and that's when they're not moving at
Versus Anatoly Malikin, second fight. We return after intermission against Anatoly Malikin once again, a man who until his most recent fight was undefeated with a 100% finish rate. His first fight with DeRitter I'm not covering purely because there's basically no grappling, as DeRitter's cage takedown attempts against a Russian champion wrestler are kinda laughable, and basically just ended cage stalling until Malikin resumes his dog walking DeRitter and knocks him out in the first round. This rematch is also that, but with a little more to talk about. It's once again a failure on DeRitter's end, but one we can learn from, especially with the few fighters with good wrestling in the UFC middleweight division he might have to contend with being Dricus du Plessis and Khamzat Chimaev, who are also stupidly strong. DeRitter opens with some really good clinch work, grabbing his weird over-under and throwing knees, but begins to encounter an issue. Malikin is both a better wrestler and his chip strength, so any attempts to bully him end in getting reversed against the cage. You have to vary your strategies and adapt, and this is quite simply not how you beat Anatoly. We'll see later in his UFC fights that RDR actually came up with a really interesting strategy, where against taller opponents, he will shoot down on their legs, and against ones who are shorter than them, he will go for the judo throws. Malikin's explosive boxing keeps pinballing RDR off the cage, and his clinches look less and less like good work and more like stalling for survival as round 1 ends. His push kicks and knees in the second are more like it, but his dogshit head movement just doesn't protect him, so when he once again tries to grapple, he's doing so deeply compromised. The first shot happens a minute into the second, with Malikin easily sprawling. RDR tries to pull guard, but wisely his opponent lets him up and resumes the clobbering. The first actual ground fighting opens the third round, as DeRitter times the single much better than before, but the Russian national champion wrestler is a hair faster and sprawls perfectly. Anatoly avoids entering the guard and circles to the front, punching from the north-south / front headlock position, something I haven't ever seen before. Very wisely, as soon as RDR is able to re-guard, Anatoly stands up. RDR is hurt and simply refuses to get up, and thus the fight is over. While the finish is sad, it's understandable. RDR's single leg, for example, was good, and the clinch work was smart, but all too little too late as he made smart grappling decisions with brains that had been pounded by Malikin's lunchbox fists. I think if they do this 100 times, Malikin wins almost all of them. Styles make fights after all, and Malikin's a bit of a weight bully. But RDR did himself no favors. Against someone short and explosive, it would probably be better to stay at jabbing distance and throw teeps Sean Strickland style, and then only clinch as Malikin explodes in, maybe go for a judo throw and a Sotogari with those long ass legs, but I understand that's just not how he fights. However, teeps are absolutely something he can stand to throw more of, and when you're that tall, they can come from halfway across the cage. DeRitter is far from a perfect fighter, but one very fun in all of his imperfections. While his striking style is janky and really only lends itself to fighting other grapplers, his mat work is really beautiful with his aforementioned top half guard, Darce mastery, and back control all being notably special, especially for a heavier weight class. He sets traps rather than just stalling and trying the same submission over and over, and he really understands how to maximize his frame, abusing it in creative ways like his half-ass sprawls and complete disregard for someone beating his body triangle. While early in his career his takedowns were rudimentary, he's cleaned up a lot of the rougher edges. While he still has trouble contending with truly elite wrestlers, from Malikin to even Nickel, he can often beat them in other ways in the case of Nickel, pivoting to other parts of his skill set. My only real note for his grappling is that he could stand to throw more ground and pound, as despite how pretty his BJJ is, he could probably pass guard with less effort by throwing in more punches. He generates a weird amount of power relative to his punching form, and at least in one, whenever he employs ground and pound, it seems to melt guys. His stand-up striking is obviously the biggest question mark, but with how he can work the clinch for both knees and takedowns, I could see him making his way to a title shot, if not beating Duplessis for the belt. He's a very rare bright spot in some truly awful weight classes, and I thank the Dutch Knight for his work. If you enjoyed this content, perhaps consider donating to my Ko-fi. If not, stay tuned and there will be more pro wrestling and MMA content to follow.